What's up, guys? Iron Books here with the second and last part of my Our Wives Under the Sea review. Here's a lightings here. After finishing recording the first part of the review, I got into a really good groove and was able to just knock out the second half of the book this whole morning. And so my thoughts, sorry about that, guys. My thoughts are somewhat jumbled. I'll give my rating and my overall notes of the book before I talk a little more in detail about my thoughts of the book. So I stand with my initial rating in the first part of my review series, as you saw, where I mentioned that a 3.25 was generally what I was thinking of during the first half of the book. I actually stick with that opinion. I give it a 3.25 out of 5, and I'm going to give some notes more so when it comes to that. Very confusing. Disappointing ending, not super disappointing, but a somewhat disappointing ending. Amazing prose, super creepy, super gross, a much better second half, and has some amazing imagery. The thing I was alluding to in the first part of my review is kind of basically what happened, what I was hoping wouldn't happen in the first part, in the first half of me reading this book, kind of happened. Where the story, and by the way, spoilers ahead for anybody that's want to read this, where for me, the story just kind of led to nowhere. There was a conclusion. The plot did move forward, but it wasn't as climactic. It wasn't enjoyable. It was bittersweet, but not like a good bittersweet, if that makes any sense. So I'll tell a little bit about the actual plot that goes on. So, in the present, Leah has been transforming so much at this point that her body is basically starting to fall apart whenever she is out of the water, to the point where one of her eyes is now like a water-like material. When she gets out of the bath, just splashes down onto the floor. She now only has one eye. And upon realizing, Miri, upon realizing that she needs to change the water in the bathtub where she is keeping Leah in, due to it not being changed at all, and so the water is stale. Bad water is the term that is used. She has to find a new place to put her. She gets into Sorry about that, guys. Lost storage there for a second. But anyways, she comes into contact with a woman that was a relative of one of the companions that Leah has in the past chapters in Leah's perspective. I feel like there was supposed to be more to that character specifically. And what I mean by that is there's some things that the character mentions that are not really spoken of or dealt with at all at the end of the book. And also, there's a mentioning of the woman having a specific piece of paper that Leah had written down notes in during her time on the submarine voyage, which just never gets brought up again. And eventually, at the end of the present chapters, the present perspective, Miri, going back to her old mother's home, bringing Leah with her, eventually goes down to the sea and lets Leah go. And I'm actually read that part of the book because I don't really know what it means. It's gonna be a little bit of a long section, but bear with me. But I can see it happening already. Look down at her in my arms as the towels fall away, weighed down by the water that has saturated each in turn and left them too heavy to cling. Passingly, I think that this might always have been inevitable, that perhaps she had always known it, but had wanted to hold on for me, for as long as she could. I can see it now, the way her chest begins to frill, the upward swell and tremor of the skin that registers its natural habitat, growing first translucent, then entirely clear. I can feel as well the way the body I am holding is becoming less a body, the way she slides between my fingers, first my Leia, then the water. First my Leia's arms, her chest, her rib cage, then the water they are struggling toward. I think of nothing, then I think about the sea lung, the day on the beach with Leia, where the ice sat on the water and the air around us seemed about to take some other form. This alchemist sea, changing something into something else. I think of this, and I look at her face, the remains of her face, my Leia. She is looking at me. This now, the last of her, and she is still looking at me when I move my arms to release her, when she melts between my hands and into the water, twisting down into the rolling tide. What persists after this is only air and water, and me between them, not quite either, and with one foot straining for the sand. First off, amazing fucking prose. This is some of the best prose I've read in a little bit. It's very similar to T.J. Klune's prose, very, very poetic in the way that sentences are drawn about, which I personally really like. I know a lot of people don't like poetic prose. I personally like poetic prose a lot. I don't know if Leah, either just fully became a sea creature and went back into the ocean, or if Leah just eventually ceased to be and just eventually became the ocean. I don't quite know. Anyways, I'll talk a little bit more about that later on. We go to Leah's perspective in the past, where she and her crew eventually come upon a creature. What creature this is, I don't know. What's only described is that there is this huge looming eye in the darkness of the ocean that is staring at them through their window. The eye encompassing all of the window, just staring at them deep. And I thought there was going to be some sort of conversation had, because Leah mentioned that she had been hearing a voice on top of one of her other co-workers, hearing a voice in the submarine, something talking to them. But it's never mentioned I assume that's what the creature was doing, what the creature actually said to them. And eventually when we get the last chapter of Leah's perspective, all it is just them going back up the surface and them begging the creature to let them go back up. But the creature doesn't do anything. It just watches them as they go back up from the deep ocean into the surface. I don't really know what happened. I felt somewhat, and hold on, let me check to make sure I'm still recording. I felt somewhat disappointed. I feel, I know this is a good book. The prose is amazing. the plot did lead somewhere. It did lead to a conclusion on both the present and the past. I kind of feel like this book is the first in a duology. I kind of feel like this book needs a sequel, because there's a couple loose ends that I personally think need to be tied up. There's a couple confusing things that I keep thinking back to. The organization that asked Leah and her crew to go down in the first place. The neighbors upstairs, and if they have any role to play with this. Even the note that the character that Miri meets giving her that supposedly belongs to Leah. I feel like this book needs a sequel. And this is a fairly new book. So I'm wondering if Julia Arnfield is planning on making a sequel. And if so, I would be incredibly intrigued to read it. But if this is just a one-off, then I am incredibly disappointed. It just feels like there was a lot of loose ends, and it feels like I should have got something. And this might be a book that I actually need to reread a couple times, or re-listen. I'm never gonna physically read it again, but I'll probably get the audiobook and re-listen to it a couple times, just to see if I can gauge whatever meaning I was supposed to be having first time reading through. I don't really know what I was supposed to be getting from the story. I don't know. It was confusing. And I think a sequel in a duology, to finish a duology, would be very appropriate and hopefully fix the loose ends that I personally see and make the story a little bit less confusing and more concrete in terms of me understanding what's happening. But yeah, so 3.25. It was good. It was creepy. It was gross. There were a couple moments in the second half, and the second half was definitely the best by far, that I was actually somewhat scared by. But I just feel like there should be something more. I feel like there should be another story that needs to be told. I don't know. But yeah, that's it, guys. 3.25. I'll catch you guys next time. This is it for my review. I'm going to be reading Lord Brock. Sorry, guys, about that. Need more storage on my freaking phone. Anyways, that was all for the video. Good book. Was just really confused. See you guys next time for my Lord Brocktree reviews.